I was sort of shocked as I began to treat their physical problems, whether it was an autoimmune disease or digestive issues or diabetes, whatever it was, and they
Yeah.
would report by changing their diet that all of a sudden these longstanding uh, issues resolved, whether it was
Right.
depression, panic attacks, ADD, bipolar
Right.
disease. It was like, what
Right.
was going on here? Memory
Exactly.
improved, cognitive function
Right.
improved. And I was like, well, how did this happen? And I began to sort of think about how
Right.
we've ignored the body-mind connection.
Right.
And we focus on the mind-body connection, which is very real and important, but it's a bi-directional system.
It is.
And
And, and
and
so,
I
yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, so I just began to get people off of the junk that they were eating, and off of the
Right.
sugar and the starch, and eating good fats, and eating whole foods, and getting rid of
Right.
processed foods. And it's just amazing how many of those ingredients really impair cognitive function.
Absolutely, and affect the brain directly. And I think that's what we try to talk about in my book is that people know that all of those bad ingredients really are about, they're often associated with poor cardiovascular health or diabetes or obesity, but they don't necessarily associate it with brain health. And you were really one of the first people to do that. In relation to that, do you have favorite foods that you want your patients to be eating? There's people are always asking me as I'm doing these interviews, well, what are your favorite foods? And I find that a little bit hard because I have a few that I like to recommend, but I'm curious. I want to know your take on it.
Well, my top, foods I think that are obviously, other than eating a lot of vegetables,
Yes.
but I think all the phytochemicals there are so important.
Right.
I think, the brain requires a lot of good fats. So I'm definitely down on the avocados, the nuts and
Hmm.
seeds, olive oil, and particularly the fish oil, as we know, really has a big impact on the brain because the brain is largely made up of these omega-3 fats. And when
That's
you're deficient, it really impairs mood, attention, memory, all
right.
the things that we worry about with our brain. And so,
Right.
my favorite meal would be like sardines and avocados,
Yeah.
maybe some olive oil in there, maybe throw some
Right.
tomatoes in. I love to eat nuts and seeds because they're full of things that we really are hard to get. A lot of minerals like selenium and zinc, and then
Exactly.
I think we really neglect a lot of those things that are so critical. And then of course, I love certain vegetable classes. The broccoli family is my favorite
Yes. Massacre.
because of all the components in it that help detoxification, folate in it, which is great for your memory.
Right.
Liver is a great brain food. It's some people don't like, but it's one
But
of the
it's
most.
actually really, if people
Yeah.
eat it, it's actually really good for your brain. It's
Yeah, if
cool
you actually
because,
look, if you look it up, and it's fascinating. If you look at the nutritional density of liver compared to vegetables,
yeah.
it makes vegetables look like the worst food on the planet because it's like orders of magnitude more vitamin C and B
Right.
vitamins, and
Right.
and it's incredible how nutrient dense it is.
Exactly.
But we don't
It,
really, and that's what the animals know. The animals always eat the organs first. If you're a
that's
lion, you're going to go after the organs,
for organs. They seem to know that instinctually.
yeah.
No, it's fascinating because I think those are great options. And one of the things I'm realizing is that there are also some really good studies coming out around, things that we don't often realize. You eat a lot of vegetables, but you also have organ meats and those types of things. By the way, we have a recipe for a sardine snack in the book,
Yeah.
which I think, and that was the whole reason. It's super rich in the omega-3 fats that we need. But I think that people often just take for granted why they should eat vegetables, or why is my doctor saying eat more greens? But there's some compelling data in. I know that you've done so much of work around the gut microbiome and understand it so well. But there's also research that's come out around the folates. And when you eat, rich leafy greens, there's Odoribacter, which is one of the bacteria that actually thrives when you eat green vegetables, but leafy greens because of the folate. So that's really cool because that's the bacteria that makes butyrate. And
Yeah.
butyrate is one of those short chain fatty acids that we need for better brain health. So it's really cool the research that's coming out about
I
that. And I
never
know
thought I'd
kind
heard
of
a psychiatrist talking about butyrate. That's impressive.
you know the book, so we talk a lot about. We try to break it down for people. But it's interesting. I was thinking about sort of nutrition and mental health, and when I was in residency, Herb Benson, who formed the Benson Henry
Yes.
Institute and mindfulness, you know him
Yeah,
as well.
I took his training in 1996.
There you go. So it's interesting because I almost feel like the nascent field, although we've been talking about it and practicing it for many years, it's sort of becoming it's now coming of age where people are much more aware of it. And, we feel that many people are reaching out because they've made this connection and they haven't been able to discuss it with their doctors, or they feel, that it's been dismissed. And the reason I bring up Dr. Benson is because I feel like nutrition and mental health is in that phase of growing now, as people really get more on board with it. I hope that, I hope that people will continue to support the movement, because if not, there's a fallacy around, oh, there's not enough research behind this or that. But I think, quite different. So.
Well, people, there's no evidence. I'm like, well, have you read, the 700,000 papers that are put out every year?
Right.
I mean, there's no way any physician can keep up. And if they don't know what it is, they just say there's no evidence. But if you start to dig and look.
Absolutely.
And I remember back in 2006, 7, when I started researching my book for the Ultra Mind Solution.
Right.
I was sort of shocked at the amount of data there was on a lot of these nutritional factors and brain health and the gut. And, I mean, I was writing about the microbiome and they didn't even call it the microbiome back then, but I was writing about the gut, brain, and the bugs in the gut and how they affect cognitive function.
And we're talking about what, probably 15 years ago?
Yeah, almost 15 years ago.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
it was just way under the radar. But you start to dig, and now there's just mountains of information and data on this. If you just look, there's so much information. And it may not be these large, massive, randomized controlled trials, but you look at the cumulative evidence over a long period of time, and you just see that there's increasing data on the role of nutrition and mental health and brain health, and the role of other factors like gut health and brain health, the role of environmental toxins, the role of hormones, all these serious factors, inflammation. I mean, nobody was talking about inflammation in the brain, 15 years ago, but we were talking about it because it's if you just start to look at the data that was coming out, it was really evident that the brain gets inflamed and it can't say ouch, and the way it shows that it has problems instead of a sore knee is basically mood and attention and memory issues.
Exactly. No, I'm just, I want to emphasize that I really am so impressed that you made those connections. And I'm not just saying that we've had this conversation in the past, because it's almost as though a lot of people reaching out to us say that those types of things, when they talk to their doctors, are brushed aside. And so there's a contingent of people who actually believe these connections and talk to their patients about it and see the impact and the effect. And I'm sort of a little bit tired of hearing there's not enough science and there's not this and there's not that. I think it really takes a deeper dive into the evidence and really interpreting the data, like understanding why the short chain fatty acids are important, or what the bacteria are that we should be bringing back to the gut. So have you noticed with your patients any particular ingredients that help, say, anxiety or worry? Has there been any connection that you've noticed there?
Well, I mean, it's more the things that people are doing that drive anxiety and worry. I mean, I think one of the shocking things that I discovered was when I looked at the data that sugar and starch actually increase adrenaline and cortisol.
Right.
So when you eat a cookie, it's like you're being chased by a tiger, and your body doesn't know the difference. And I think this is something so that people don't understand. And I've seen people with severe, full-blown panic attacks that are just because their blood sugars are going up and down, up and down.
Absolutely.
And when your blood sugar crashes, which happens after you, for example, eat a starchy, sugary foods, it'll make your insulin go really high, and that'll cause your blood sugar to crash, and you're on this roller coaster. When it goes down, that's a life-threatening emergency. When you don't have enough food to eat, when your blood sugar is dropping, your body thinks, I'm going to die. I better get food. I'm going to go do something. And so the stress hormones kick in, cortisol kicks in, adrenaline kicks in, and people just feel like this. And I mean, I think you just go on a birthday party with kids eating cake and cookies and ice cream, and you're like, you need a randomized controlled trial to tell how they affect their sugar on the brain.
Exactly. And, I think that sometimes in the moment, right, people have a cookie or they have that piece of cake or whatever it is, and, they feel good. In the moment, they feel good. But the whole point is that the long-term effect of those sugars and those, unfortunate, or the carbs that we really don't want to be eating, really do impact the brain. They ultimately affect cognition, even like you mentioned. And I know that people have studied this. So it's no longer that, we should be concerned about high and low blood sugars for diabetes only. This is truly affecting our brain. And, it's something that we should try to get away from. I recently discovered that I thought there were about 61 names for sugar on food labels. And
There's like 200 or something.
but exactly. So, I was like looking and searching, and there's like more than 200. So one of the things I say to my patients, look at food labels, take a photograph, Google it, because number one, if there's, a ton of stuff in the food label, it's probably something you shouldn't be having, but at least find out what those curious names are, But the other one like that is MSG. That's another one that's become,
if you don't recognize it, or
yeah.
you wouldn't have it in your cupboard, you shouldn't eat it, right? I mean,
Exactly.
do you have maltodextrin in your cupboard that you sprinkle in your cereal? No.
Exactly. Then you shouldn't. That's a good one.
Something like butylated hydroxytoluene that you put on your vegetables? Probably not.
So they don't, if the word is long and it's hard for you to pronounce, try not to buy it. Do you have? So I know that you love vegetables. Actually, I watched you cooking.
Yeah.
That was awesome. You did a great job. That's a nice recipe. I think the salmon and some delicious. I think you did a stir fry. It was really good. You're a good cook.
Persian cucumber. Yeah, I made lots of things.
Yeah, that was awesome. Do you have a favorite dish that you like to cook?
Gosh, the truth is I cook really simply most of the time. I'll just make stir-fried veggies with greens with broccoli, with kind of things with ginger and garlic, and then I'll make maybe a big sweet potato and like a piece of lamb or fish or something like that. I make simple food, but then sometimes I'll make fancy food. I made my Szechuan scallops. I really like that.
Oh, that sounds good.
Your special Szechuan pepper. It's a very unique kind of pepper. It makes your tongue a little bit numb.
It goes numb.
It does not. Not everybody likes it, but I love it.
I like it actually.
A little red chili pepper, onions, garlic, ginger.
I love that you love it spicy.
Fry it and throw some scallops in there, a little Szechuan sauce.
And you're getting all the brain benefits from the capsaicin and all of those ingredients. Although I know that sometimes when people have Szechuan peppers for the first time and they feel that numbing in their mouth, they can feel a little strange.
Yeah, my wife
if they don't know about it.
Well, the theory is if you get the numbing pepper from the Szechuan pepper, it numbs your mouth so you can eat even hotter peppers.
There you go. Okay. What's the hottest pepper that you can eat?
I don't really know, but once I was in Mexico at this place giving a talk, and they had an organic farm, and they were growing all these hot peppers, and the gardener was taking us around and showing us everything. He's like, "This one's hot," and I was like, "That's not so bad." He's like, "This one's really hot," and then he gave me this one that was like, you probably shouldn't eat, but I just popped. And he started feeding these cherries down my mouth, but it was no, somebody said habanero. No, it was way hotter than that. It was like so hot I couldn't believe it, and my mouth burned for like an hour.
Yeah. I've had similar experiences. I think some of the ghost peppers are pretty bad. I mean, they still benefit from the capsaicin, but it has to be something that a person can tolerate. But I think that's awesome. Do you have any recent studies that you've liked regarding the gut microbiome that you have just found to be interesting in terms of new research or anything like that?
I mean, what's fascinating to me is sort of the data on the brain. Fecal transplants curing autism. Like, how does that even make sense? Right? And I think when I start to look at the impact of the microbiome on brain and cognitive function, it's just so powerful. And I think you don't go to the neurologist or the psychiatrist and like, okay, we're going to work on healing your gut, and like they don't even know what's going on south of the border, of the neck,
Right.
So that's a problem, and I think that's such compelling research because it really sort of speaks to the way in which the gut regulates inflammation. Inflammation affects the brain, and then you begin to have a different doorway to actually start to treat people, which is so exciting.
Right. Absolutely. One of the studies that we looked at in our chapter on schizophrenia and bipolar disorder was that they did a fecal transplant from schizophrenic patients into germ-free mice. And the mice developed the symptoms of schizophrenia. And I thought that was one of the most compelling studies because these were mice, of course, that didn't have a microbiome. And the fact that could be...
Did the mice start hearing voices? What happened?
It was interesting. I think they looked at the behaviors. I don't think the mice could answer that question. But it's fascinating that it's actually coded in the microbiome. And then a similar thing I think we've talked about before about yo-yo dieting. It's almost as though people wonder why they lose weight, gain weight, and that kind of stuff. but it turns out that a study showed that the microbiome actually almost has this, for want of a nicer term, kind of a fat memory that the mice
Yeah.
that remember, the mice that were kind of overweight, even when they lost weight, still had that fat memory. So it's some of that stuff, and then they also found that there were certain polyphenols and phytonutrients that they could eat that would sort of offset or were absent in that
Yeah.
particular study. So it's cool.
Yeah.
I just think, yeah.
That's the other thing that was sort of a relatively new discovery. Even though I've been doing this for 30 years, we know about probiotics, prebiotics,
Right.
fiber, and whole foods,
Right.
and not even things that are going to harm the gut.
Right.
But the discovery of the role of polyphenols in the microbiome is just so massive.
Yeah.
And I think people don't understand the importance of eating these colorful fruits and vegetables for their microbiome. And that's where all these compounds are there, like pomegranate green tea or cranberry, these plant foods that are these deep colored foods that have these pigments that have enormous benefit for certain good bacteria in the gut. So it's not just about taking probiotics, you've got to feed the good guys.
You got to feed the good bugs. And what I challenge my patients to do sometimes is, in a day, how many different colored foods can you eat of the vegetables and fruit? Because that's how you can get the fiber, in addition to the beans, nuts, and seeds. But I love that. And someone told me recently that there might be, is it 25,000 phytonutrients or
That
something
was
like
me.
that?
I said that.
Yes, that was
I
you.
told
You
you
told me
that.
that was being studied. Yeah, and I remember that, and I was like, wow, that is impressive. Just because it's one doesn't think, oh, there might be a few here and a few in green tea, but there's so many more than that. But I love speaking to you. I always feel like I learn a ton from you, and I can see from the comments that people feel the same way. People are like, they love your recipes and all sorts of things. But I really appreciate your time, and especially being on vacation. I didn't realize that you were away. And thank you for supporting us, and for I have to say, Mark, I thank you for validating the stuff that I'm putting together in this nutritional psychiatry book, because not everyone is understanding that connection in the physician world, and I appreciate that, and the fact that you've done it for 30 years, and then your book that you researched in terms of brain health. You truly are the accidental psychiatrist. You and I should do some consults.
Yeah, it's just so powerful. I mean, I think it's one of those areas in functional medicine that is just so strikingly powerful. And I've treated schizophrenic patients, bipolar patients, people with depression, anxiety, autism, ADD, Alzheimer's, and it's just like, wow, there's a whole new doorway to help people in ways that just our traditional medicine is ignoring. It's not just so simple as the food. I mean, there are a lot of other factors that drive inflammation. There's toxins, there's a microbiome, there's allergens, there's infections. So it's all really important to actually understand this sort of dynamic of the body in a different way. And I'm so excited about what's happening in medicine right now. I mean, there's a great book by a group from Harvard where you're at called Network Medicine. It's a textbook, so people shouldn't probably buy it unless you're a geek like me. But it's all about how our entire conception of the body is flawed, and it doesn't take into account that the body is this biological network where everything's connected. So there's no model to explain how the microbiome affects the brain given the current medical paradigm. It just isn't. It's just siloed specialties that are all separate and they don't interact. And it's nutrition, it's the gut microbiome, it's toxins, all this stuff that we ignore in traditional medicine. And yet, these scientists from Harvard have really mapped out how most conditions are caused by multiple factors, that they require multiple interventions to actually optimize health. So if a patient has folate deficiency and their microbiome's not great, and they have too much heavy metals in their system, you can't just treat one thing. You've got to deal with all of it in order to help the patient. And we just take this one drug to fix your depression. It doesn't make any sense.
Right. And people often develop side effects and have even more gut disruption thereafter.
Yeah.
So I think the cycle sort of goes on. But no, I appreciate you sharing that, and I do feel that those doctors who truly believe this connection really should be. The last question I have for you is
Somebody asked, what's the textbook title? It's called Network Medicine.
Yes. Oh, yeah, exactly. Network medicine, and we'll try to put a link for that. Also, the very last question I have is, do you have any opinion about FODMAPs? A lot of people seem to ask me about that. Have you found an association in your patients?
Yeah, so what FODMAPs is a non-fermenting diet. and it takes out all the starches that the bacteria that are bad bugs like to eat and cause bloating and distension and what we call food baby. and in medical terms, as we call it, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And it's a very common condition. It's not something I learned about in medical school. And now it's well recognized as a phenomenon. It can be these bacteria producing methane or hydrogen that makes you blow up. And that causes a lot of discomfort. It can cause a lot of inflammation. It can cause gut. And so you really have to treat it. And FODMAPs is one way, which is reducing all the fermentable starches and sugars in your diet. But there's a lot of other things you need to do just besides that. You may need antibiotics, you might need herbs, you might need to treat what the cause of the SIBO is. So it's really a process to figure this out. But I think it's important. It is a real phenomenon that affects so many people. You know, we call it irritable bowel or bloating, or I've got bloating, but
right. Well, and SIBO is now more recognized. And I have patients who come in and say that they've gained like 3 pounds overnight just from the bloating and the distension and the discomfort. And you know, when we recognize what the condition is, and you can start to work with them on that, it starts to help them. But we're almost at that time when we have to say goodbye. And I again thank you for coming in from vacation to talk to us. I really appreciate it, and always rely on you for some great information. And like I said, always learn from you. So thank you, Mark. I appreciate it. Thank you for supporting. You too. Take good care. Enjoy your vacation.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.